Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first DNA Subcommittee meeting of 2020. I would like to introduce our new chairperson for the DNA Subcommittee, Dr. Bruce Weir. He brings decades of knowledge and experience in the applications of DNA. He's currently the chair for the Department of Biostatistics, director of the Genetic Analysis Center, and also director of the Institute of Public Health Genetics at the University of Washington. We're pleased that he's agreed to serve as chair to the DNA Subcommittee. I would also like to welcome our new member, Dr. Jennifer Smith, of the Washington, D.C. Department of Forensic Sciences. Dr. Smith will serve as the representative of the discipline in forensic science. And also another new member, another new individual. I'd like to introduce our new special counsel to the DNA Subcommittee and Commission on Forensic Science. It's Natasha Harvin-Locklear. Ms. Harvin-Locklear will be replacing Mr. Brett Knowles. Now I will turn the meeting over to Dr. Weir.
Thank you, Dr. Dooley. So before we start, I want to say it's fun to be here, back with old friends and some new friends. So your reputation precedes you. I've been aware of this committee and the commission for many years. I think New York State's been a leader in the introduction and adherence to the standards in DNA testing. So I'm looking forward very much to being part of your deliberations. And I think it's going to be interesting and I think fun. So thank you. So welcome to this meeting. So as we heard, I'm Bruce Weir, and joining us is Dr. Bieber, Dr. Eastman, Dr. Gettings, Dr. Kidd, Dr. Smith, and Dr. Souza. So you've received the draft agenda. A motion to approve the draft agenda. Approve the agenda. And do we need a second for that? Thank you. And any discussion on that? So how do we vote? Raise of hands or just voice?
Raise of hands.
All those in favour? Yes. Aye. Thank you.
Any opposed?
Any opposed? Thank you.
Carries.
Thank you. So you've also received a draft copy of the minutes from November 8th. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Okay, Ken?
Yes. I was surprised and think, if other people remember as I do, that there's no section in here or statement that the committee was very thankful for Chairman Adams' work for many years with the committee, and nothing reflecting that is in the minutes.
Thank you. That seems like an appropriate comment. Anybody want to voice the support for that idea?
I concur with Dr. Kidd.
So can we get that added to the minutes? Thank you. That's very nice. Thank you.
Is that a motion with
Yes,
an
a motion
amendment
to approve. With
Yes. You want to move a motion to approve
Given
with that
that
amendment?
people seem to remember that, and not just me, I will so move that such a statement be added to the minutes.
A statement of appreciation for Dr. Adams' work as chair.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Second to that. Thank you, Dr. Souza. Any further discussion on that? All those in favour? Say aye. Against? No, so motion carries. Thank you. So we're beginning a fairly long list of accreditation and laboratory updates. So how do we proceed?
We just start with the materials.
We have the material.
And you start with Erie County, their first up.
So are they joining?
They're available via phone.
They are available.
There's only one issue that I noticed on page 151. A no response in the inspection. Did you see that,
on
Allison?
the Erie County one.
In Erie County.
That would be a different lab. 151 is a different lab.
Oh,
Yeah, next Monroe.
next. And there's nothing.
What
for
was
Erie.
it? Was it this
Yeah, there
lab
was- I
that
didn't
you had a
see
concern?
In Erie County.
No, I guess it's the next. Sorry, it's
Well, the
Monroe.
only thing, if this
is not page 96 still Erie County? The only thing that I mention is, I think you've mentioned this in the
Several
past,
times.
that, and especially, I think, were these all internal to Erie County?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so it's on page 92, if there are no findings, they should just write none. On
Hold
page
on.
96.
I don't know, I mean, that happened in, I think, one or two other ones, and it's happened in the past. Is there some way? that-
Excuse me, could you just clarify what we're talking about? What's the issue?
Appendix A, which is the findings.
Right,
It's occasionally is left blank, and it needs to have just a statement, no findings, if there were no findings.
So our red page 96.
right, yes, excuse me, yes.
That's on page 96,
So there were no findings and consequently no response.
right? If you-
But I went through and checked the whole document to make sure there weren't any oversights.
Right.
And there were no findings checked, there were no no's checked off, but it really would be good if they would put no findings on Appendix A.
So
That's
there was,
something that you would want all the labs to be aware of.
Yeah, if all the labs, because it happens,
Yes.
it happened, I think there's at least one other one here that they did it.
so otherwise there was no point in having this exercise if there was no conclusion, is that what you're saying?
Right, I mean, you don't want to leave it blank, it could be
Right.
an oversight.
Right.
You never know. They might have missed something.
Right.
So if they're going to make a statement, no findings, they've carefully gone through the document and their final review of the document before they submit it to DCJS, and they should state no findings.
Do others have similar concerns? It seems like
Yes.
It seems like a sensible thing to do. It can be a very brief statement. Is that what you're saying?
Sure.
It helps also just in our review of the documents.
I always check, just in case they skipped something, but I still think it kind of completes it.
Would the subcommittee like to issue a formal guidance to the laboratory and take a vote on that?
To all of the laboratories?
To all of the laboratories?
Sure, just,
Yes.
I think I have a question, just, it's, the audit teams, though, would be the ones taking the guidance, and the audit teams may not necessarily be at the laboratories, so it might be something we also need to talk to ANAB about, or whoever's doing the audits.
I don't think I've ever seen it on an external audit
There's an external one here.
that has no,
I think so, I think
I
so.
thought it was an internal.
Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
it's a good point for the internal ones that are doing, yes, they should do it to themselves, but it's also probably guidance we should double,
Yeah.
triple check to make sure that the,
That nothing should be left blank.
yeah. And I, to be honest, I think it varies from
Yeah.
team to team.
So is it implied by all these checklists where they've checked there's
Yes.
no concerns or yes?
There will
or-
probably be a couple of additional comments I have to make about
Sure.
properly completing the QAS audits. So do we want to pull it all together and make
Yeah,
this
and
amendment?
that's the suggestion I would get, that it's good as a reviewer of this that we're picking up on these things, so it might be something we could give to the auditing groups. Because as the auditee, you can't really tell them what to do.
Yeah, no one
But
has
for internal ones, it's a great point, so. But I think if there's guidance we could give to those groups, I don't think that would be a
Right,
bad
right.
idea. It's a very small ask, that they would just complete it.
So you're suggesting we wait until we've
I
been
can
through
bring it up
these and
now.
then, well, then we could, unless there's some other issues that you think are going to come.
Yeah, we're going to run into it on another couple of
The
audits.
same issue.
No, this is going to, well, I think we'll see this same issue of Appendix A being left.
So why don't we take care of this? Would you like to propose an action that we could suggest, a guidance be issued?
That Appendix A, if there are no findings in the audit, whether internal or external, that Appendix A have some kind of statement stating that
to
there
that
are no
effect.
findings.
To
Could
that-
be as simple as no findings.
Yes, okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
I think that's a good idea.
That's a move. I'll second.
So further discussion on that. All right, let's vote on this motion, which seems like a sensible one. All those in favour, say aye. Against? Raise your hands. No contrary, so that motion passes. Thank you.
May I ask for, when we prepare the guidance, are we issuing it to all of the lab directors in the state and sending a copy to ANAB and to the FBI?
Yeah, A2LA, whoever might do these audits, we get it.
So the guidance is to the auditors rather than to the labs, is that correct?
Well, if it's an
That
internal
makes-
Well,
audit, then it is
yeah.
to the lab.
And it's not always the same people who do the internal audit.
Yeah.
So quality
Should
assurance.
included internal and external.
I think so.
But I think having it in writing like that would allow the lab, even with an external audit, to say, could you do this? Because
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So the motion, just make sure it's clear who we're sending it to, what we're doing,
Yes.
what we're sending.
So would you like to just restate who this guidance is going to? I think the intention is to the auditors, but then you saying, but sometimes this is internal.
Yes, so perhaps for the laboratories in New York, it should go to the lab director or the quality manager, and to the quality manager. And then to also cover external audits, it should go to, as long as ANAB is still currently the organization that's being used in the state, it would go to ANAB.
But they're the only ones who's, okay.
But in addition to that, can I also say, ANAB currently does the QAS portion. If that were to change at some point, would you also like to include anyone else?
I would include it to all potential vendors.
relevant,
You know,
accredited.
But I mean, to the FBI.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
I think Sweetdam, you can
I
send it off.
Yeah, I looked in I have a draft document of the 2020 QAS, and I didn't see anything stating that you should do that, and I don't know if I have the most current draft document, but it's coming out in June, isn't it?
Yes. And
I don't know if there's any direction I didn't notice any direction on internal audits, but I think the document should be treated and followed, and the instructions followed the same on an internal audit and taken just as seriously as an external audit. Often, they seem to be more thorough when they do an internal audit, so.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to raise to that, because your perspective is different when you're reviewing these documents as this team does versus when you're filling them out in the heat of the audit. So I think it's a good idea to let all parties know if you're, I think it would be appreciated that having that information there stated really clearly is appropriate. So if this body is allowed to make recommendations to people like that, it's a good idea.
You gonna try again?
So let's go back again. Guidance to, just want to confirm, guidance to the lab director, quality assurance managers, ANAB, and
FBI.
FBI.
Who would that be?
FBI Sweetdam
Yeah.
chair.
Before we finalize it, one quick question. So, for argument's sake, we do submit this suggestion, and then our office does get something that is void of what we're asking for. Would OFS reject it, or would we still put it forward?
Is this a shall or a must, I think is the
Yeah.
question. What's our guidance?
Oh, if FBI says no, or?
Or,
If the labs don't do it.
Any
Right.
particular audit doesn't do it.
yeah, we've provided guidance, but we get a report in that is not,
It's left blank?
yeah. Would you like us
Send
to
it back to
reject
them
it?
and have them
So this is a must,
fix it.
not a
Yeah,
shall.
I would
Okay.
think so.
But if
So
it's
by the
an
time
external
this
audit,
committee
shall.
gets it,
It's a
it's
shall, not a
safe.
should.
But if it's an external audit,
It might be difficult for our office to get them to resubmit it with the box check is my only concern. And if that's the case, how would you like us to?
But don't we doesn't the Forensic Science, Commission on Forensic Science supersede ANAB with regards to accreditation within New
What
York
about the
State?
FBI?
So,
Well, it's really, the way I look at this is the Sweetdam promulgates these guidance, and then you get auditors to come in and actually do the audit. So the Bureau per se doesn't do the audit. It's either another entity auditing, right?
Yeah.
So I think the guidance could go to the Bureau to request that they somehow address that in the training. That would be Sweetdam, I think. It would be Tony Onorato, chair of Sweetdam. And then we could provide, I think it's appropriate to ask all the potential auditors out there, because it's actually a great idea for everybody. So ANAB, A2LA, I don't know who I'm leaving out, but all of the potential auditing bodies then would probably accommodate this. It seems
So
like-
could this be a simple, a box to check under Appendix A, under findings? One box says no findings, and then another box that says other. I mean, is that?
Well, I
is
don't
that-
know if that's in the new document, but we're not allowed to, this is a controlled document,
Okay, all
so
right.
we can't change it.
Okay.
But I think they
For an
can just
internal,
write
we
in it,
probably-
like, yeah,
So for internal, we could make it a must, and maybe for the external audits, a should,
yeah.
or something compromise like that.
Until as I said, I don't think it's a big request. I think it's yeah.
Yeah, something that they probably never.
I think they just didn't consider it, would be my thought.
So thank you. So are we clear now that you have,
try again?
we have what we need?
Motion makers.
Allison, are we ready? So the guidance to the lab directors and quality assurance managers, A&AB, FBI, SWGDAN chair, that the QAS audits shall leave no blank spaces under Appendix A.
But that they should just state whether there were no, if there's no findings,
Please
to
state.
make a statement of no findings.
But I think no blank spaces covers that.
Well, there's findings, and then there's also responses, so.
Right.
Responses, I would just put not applicable if
do you-
findings said
Do we
none.
want them to have to put something in both of those places?
I think if there's no findings, the response is yay. So, I mean, I don't think the response is.
Or we could say no blank under findings.
Yeah, all right, or just
Yeah, I don't
add, if there are no findings, please add that to the, state that in the findings.
If there are no
Box.
findings, please state so.
Yeah, please state
Please
so.
state if there are no
No
findings.
findings. In Appendix A, that's how I say it.
How would we like the motion to read? I sure am.
Now start me off.
Okay, guidance to the lab directors, quality assurance managers, A&AB, and FBI SWGDAN chair.
For internal FBI quality assurance audits, that if there are no findings for in the audit, to state that there were no findings in Appendix A. Under,
So the findings
under
section,
findings.
under the findings section should not be left blank. It should either indicate that the findings or that there were no findings.
That
I already said it.
was that helpful to you? That seemed a bit
Yeah.
more confusing, actually.
And under findings.
So that's your motion. So that's good?
Okay.
You're taking on, and then,
If there were no findings, then under the findings section of Appendix A, there must, this is for internal audit, there must be a statement to that effect, or that there were no findings. For external audits, there should be a statement of no findings. Then we won't get anybody's back up that we're trying to.
I think it's a good idea.
Is everybody happy with this clarification of what we just voted on?
Can you read it out loud again?
No, I think it's clear enough.
It's not clear?
I think it's
Okay.
clear enough.
I don't think we've changed the meaning of our original motion at all, but we've provided more clarity, more
Yes.
help for these. But
Okay, we can get a second now.
a second, we had a second. So, Dr. Kidd moved and second, Dr. Souza. Okay. And all those in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Well, that was interesting. All right, so we proceed to Monroe County.
I would like to make one comment, page 67, 68,
so still on Erie County.
What's our,
Erie County.
do we have our
still.
page number? No, we-
Red 67, 68. it always comes up. It bothers the whatever out of me, the semantics of electrophoresis detection systems versus genetic analysis. It will come up again in OCME, but the wording is technically incorrect.
It's going to be fixed in the 2020 audit document.
Oh,
So they're aware of that.
Yeah.
okay.
We just
So
have
isn't
to.
it typically if you use a CE, you mark genetic analyzer?
Right, and we
use
have the
gel,
discrepancy in
electrophoresis.
the New York State Police's data bank versus casework section because one called it one and one called it the
But the
other.
OCME one actually flips it. Now it's an external audit that we'll be looking at. And they checked yes for electrophoresis and no for genetic analyzer.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That'll be fixed.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
it's a known issue.
Yeah.
Are you happy
I'm,
with
I'm,
that change coming?
go on.
So there was a finding from this laboratory. Anybody got any concerns or comments about that?
I mean, is that typical that labs, when you have someone who is just cleaning glassware or something like that, you document that they've been trained to, I don't know if they use glassware anymore, but they've been trained to clean the countertop? That's, yeah.
There's an SOP for everything these
Okay.
days. Breathing, we have not put into.
What about janitorial staff?
A
Is
lot
there
of times we
training
do our own. Well, I don't
Okay.
know. I can't speak for every lab. The janitorial staff's not allowed.
The technical lead's available by phone, if you'd like to.
No, I'm just, okay.
Are we on Monroe County?
Yes, so there was an issue that seems to have been resolved. Is that correct?
It's a nice internal audit. They're very thorough.
All right, so everybody's happy with that? All right, so we move on to...
I do have a comment.
Sure, please.
There's instructions in the QAS document that state that for when there's a no or a not applicable, that you need to indicate in the comment section under that area of the standard, the reason for the no or the not applicable. They did not do that, but they did state it in Appendix A, but it says in the instructions, and it does say it also in the 2020 document. I just like to see everybody doing it correctly, that we shouldn't skip anything on an internal audit. It should be treated exactly the same as an external.
I think that's worth telling them because otherwise it seems so thorough, so maybe
Yeah.
they don't know, but
Yeah.
I read that too.
Yeah.
When I saw the no and there was no explanation, so I made a note,
Yeah.
and then I found it later.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's Okay,
Yeah.
but you're right.
Agreed.
We'll get her on the phone.
We'll call her then.
We could put that on it's in the instructions, so
Yeah, I think it's worth it.
to call them, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Especially as you're reviewing it, that's why you're supposed to put it
Exactly.
there.
Right.
Do you have a page number for an example? of that?
It's 5.7.
151?
Thanks.
Crime Lab, Gail Conklin speaking.
Hi, Gail. You're on the phone with the DNA subcommittee.
Hi.
Hi, this is Allison Eastman. I just wanted to make a comment. I think you did a very thorough internal audit, but I just wanted to comment that according to the instructions in the QAS document, when you have a no or a not applicable, that you shall, it says shall, make a state in the comments section for that standard within the document, the reason for the no or the not applicable. That's the only thing otherwise, I think you did a very nice, thorough audit.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. That was an oversight, obviously. We were aware of that, and with a long checklist, we must have just missed one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was it.
Okay,
Any other
Thank you.
comments?
Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Thanks, Gail.
okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.
All right, thank you. Any other comments on Monroe County? All right. moving on to Nassau County.
See, on Appendix A on Nassau County, they do make a statement. There are no findings associated with this audit.
Ah, good work. Everything was fine there. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, New York City OCME.
What page is that? Sorry.
360.
360. Thank you.
When I saw that, I wrote yay.
So we're heading to a vote arising from this. So we need discussion first of all about the report that we have.
This is for New York City?
Yeah, New York City, the OCME. So, do we have a particular page for this issue? I've got the general pages starting at page 316, but for this particular issue, where are we on there?
It's page 368 in red.
368.
Looks like they've resolved the nonconformity. They were very thorough about it.
Do we need to check to see if these corrections have been made? They said they were going to do this by December 15th.
They submitted the revised
Oh, they did?
protocol.
Okay. Any more discussion on this before we proceed? So I'm looking for a motion then to issue a binding recommendation to the Commission on Forensic Science to renew the New York State accreditation to New York City Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Biology and the Discipline of Biology for the period concurrent with their A and AB accreditation. Do I have such a motion? Thank you, Dr. Smith. Dr. Reisman, seconded. Discussion. Thank you. So all those in favour? Contrary? No? Motion passes. Thank you. Very nice. And then just the remainder of this report, just for information. Been some personnel changes apparently. So. Very good.
Congratulations.
Thank you. All right, so we move on to Onondaga County. Did I say that probably? Onondaga, all right.
The only question I have, if you jump to the red page 615, this is in Appendix C. I haven't seen this before, where the question is halfway down the page, qualified auditor, no. Why would you engage, Jennifer, an auditor who wasn't qualified? I've never seen that before.
I've seen it before.
An
You have?
internal audit, right?
This, I think, was,
It's a great way to learn. To have,
What's the requirement for an internal audit?
you have to have at least one member of the auditing team to be a qualified
And
auditor.
that's Kathleen Hum.
Yes. But
there's only,
there's no signature on her document.
Oh, go to the next page. There's a scanned copy with the signature on there. I saw that at first as well. Yeah, it's on 614 is the signature.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay. So you've got
Sort of
two.
apprenticing.
Okay, got it.
It's how we teach.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm okay.
There's always got to be that first one.
Yeah, I'm okay.
I have a note, it's not a big deal, but under developmental and internal validation, they marked yes for everything, even though they didn't do any, and that's usually marked NA.
What page are you on, Catherine?
Let's see, 562, 565. Say 563.
563.
Dr. Prado is available by phone. Would you like us to call?
I just want to know from the other subcommittee members if that seems atypical.
What's the red page number?
563.
Just see if there are any,
Maybe Allison would know best if you only mark that.
Does one use validated method have developmental validation preceded the use of a novel methodology for forensic DNA?
Then go to the next page. All of those are marked yes. Those are usually marked NA.
You know, I think they're supposed to be marked at yes,
Oh.
because the developmental validations have been preceded,
Okay, not by the laboratory.
not by the laboratory.
Okay.
I'm trying to think, I did a recent ANAB assessment.
Because
As I
it says-
recall, they say that you mark those yes.
Because it has been performed.
Yeah.
And it's basically saying somebody has done
Yeah,
them and you're relying on
It's not like they did an internal validation and there was
Yeah.
no developmental validation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Um,
says if a laboratory can
as a
document the developmental validation, 8.2 shall be marked yes, but I think all the other ones in this whole slew of them mark it NA.
I could go and look and, I deleted all of the stuff from my last assessment.
So do we,
I think per instructions from ANAB, you were supposed to mark them yes from my last assessment.
Yeah, it says it may rely upon it, as Catherine just said. Laboratory can document.
yeah, New York, in the New York one, it was marked NA.
Yeah.
I deleted my last assessment. Destroyed all the documents, so I can go back and
This is just one that was done on the outside.
Yeah, it was the first time I had ever seen it, too. I was like, oh, you're supposed to put yes there. And that's the way I was instructed for.
Oh, no, wait.
As a
It might be
technical assessment.
unique to OCME because I'm looking at the one before that. What is that? Marks them yes. I think I read OCME and then
Yeah.
Onondaga and they were different.
Yeah.
Nassau County marked them yes. So perhaps we should just tell Onondaga. The one before that marks them yes.
Well, it's interesting because it sort of gives them a little bit of an out, because it says they may rely on them, and then if you have them there, you would mark
Right.
yes. So
And
I
if
don't
you
know,
don't
if
have
you
them
don't
there, you
have them
certainly
there, you
have
could
the literature.
NA. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
That you're not aware of the developmental
Yeah.
validation.
Well, or that it's not applicable. It's really what NA could be, because they didn't do it. I'm
Yeah.
I think we should ask ANAB what their,
yeah.
or maybe it's clearer in the 2020 document. I didn't look under that section. Hang on a second here.
Because it is sort of, it's almost like you have a choice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, Monroe County
So
marked
we would
yes.
say you'd want to have them, I
Right.
think.
Yeah.
That would be the practice we would.
I'm pulling up the audit document for the
Something
2020.
Hasn't been developed.
Which section is this now?
It's 8.2.
Oh, they may have changed the validation standard 8. Okay.
Okay.
Standards 8.2.
It says for all validations under
Under
review. I think that's where the confusion is. If it's been previous, or if it's a validation that's taking place during that audit.
So does that
Oh,
mean
interesting.
all these others had a validation that was
No.
reviewed?
I think there's probably confusion to
Yeah.
say, Are they there? Yes.
Yes.
Or are they taking place under this audit? It would be yes. So, and on the new one, it
Yeah,
looks like it
this one
says
is
for those under review.
clarification. Here it
Yeah.
says, note, standards 8.2 and 8.3 and all of the subcategories. This, my disclaimer is this is a draft document that I
Yeah.
got, and I don't know if it's the final version, but on all of the subcategories may be marked NA if there are no validations to review since the last external audit. Ensure standard 8.3.3 is NA prior to marking all standards of 8.3 as NA. So 8.3.3.
Is internal, so it's the same guidance for
If the
development.
laboratory has a change in plant management. Have a- Okay, that's if 8.3.3 is NA, that's internal regulations.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it even clearer?
Right, this report was written on the previous guidelines, is that right? Not these 2020s?
2020 aren't out until June, I think.
They're not out.
So we won't have anything, so maybe we can
So-
table
There's no
this.
clear-
and-
yeah, let's
Yeah,
table
we'll,
it.
we'll send a question in. I'll
I don't
ask.
think it's a showstopper, it's
Yeah.
just,
No.
Right.
Well, you're either
Inconsistent.
yes or NA is sort of.
Yeah.
Either is appropriate at this point, so we'll ask. Not sure about
Presumably, no is inappropriate.
Yes, yes, that we know.
So how are we going to remember that? We're going to have this recorded in the minutes?
in the
of
minutes,
Yes.
maybe.
Thank you, thank you. Very good.
I mean, I can inquire with ANAB what they're doing.
And I'll ask.
Well, I will know at the end of the month, I'm doing another, no, oh,
But with, again, remember, there's other vendors that if it goes out to bid,
right.
you have to, you need to know how every vendor is instructing their auditors, so it may be more of a, how are they very
I'm
friendly.
doing a QAS at the end of the month, so.
Maybe we
with
can ask them.
ANAB, yeah,
We can ask Sweet Dam.
and see what they say.
Yeah.
But we have no action, nothing concrete about this report, is that right?
No,
Very good. Thank you. So we move on to Suffolk County. We have some people here, do we, from Suffolk County? Welcome.
but it,
So you reviewed their QAS previously, and this
Okay.
is just the letter from the FBI accepting
Yeah.
Sure.
and closing it out. So,
the other is done at the end, so.
so that's 618.
So, very good.
Okay, so. Okay.
Well, Lisa, are you happy?
Are we happy?
Are you
Yes.
still looking?
No.
All right, very good, thank you. All right, Westchester County.
The empty box.
Now,
The red page number 688. That's not checked at all. Twelve point two point 7.1.
I missed that.
Should have something checked. It should be- Yes.
12.2.7.1.
Well,
Right,
they
I
did
that.
check,
They have all the other yeses, but
they
not that one.
checked all the others, so I didn't.
They have the subcategories. Yeah.
No.
This is where enough, well, I don't think this is it.
It's not a big deal.
It's where there's a redundancy of boxes,
Yes.
It's implied,
Oh,
it's
it's that
implied,
extra.
yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
Okay, I just, Elaine Schwartz's year that she took the FBI audit class is missing from her Appendix C. And Alana, I can't remember,
Page.
has not signed her Appendix C. That,
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, the 716, red page 716.
716,
There's a blank.
and Alana Loriano has not signed hers. And I think this came up a while back because we weren't getting signatures on the appendix C. This is possibly an oversight. I see that they normally maybe do electronic signatures.
Yeah, it's a scanning
And
problem.
so they have to scan it in, and this is definitely not a scanned document. I mean, I could use
Yeah.
highlighting without using my thing to make it so that I could mark on it. So I think we should get an Appendix C signed by Alana Loriano.
Roll call.
Sure.
And the year filled in.
And the year filled
the
in.
year filled
Yeah,
in.
Yeah.
that's all. Yeah, done.
What pages? Let me see which one.
717, 718, or 716, and 717.
Yeah, and I know there was a previous Elaine's appendix, there were two for Elaine. One of them was not signed, but then I
this
see the
one's
scanned one,
scanned
so.
It may just be that they didn't put the scanned one in.
Yeah,
That's
they
why the
forgot to put
other-
the scanned one
yeah.
in, maybe.
Because that's the problem, you have this whole electronic thing.
Yeah.
And you have to put that
Could've-
page in.
Could have got stuck. with it.
Dr. Chairman, help you?
Hi, Bob.
Hello?
You're on the phone with the DNA subcommittee?
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Do we need?
If we I have Lane Schwartz and I have Alana Loriano here.
Hi, Elaine. Hi, Alana. I just had a couple of comments about your Appendix C. Elaine, you're missing your DNA audit course
Yeah,
year.
sorry about that. We missed that.
And Alana, we don't have Alana's signed Appendix C. We have an unsigned one.
I have Lane Schwartz and I have Alana Loriano here.
So would you like us to fill in those two areas and send you over a copy?
Yeah, just send them to the OFS and.
Okay,
Is that,
Yeah, we'll include them.
we can do that.
That's all.
Okay, fine. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, don't hang up. I forgot something else. Now, maybe this is something the whole group should discuss. On your Appendix E, under approved validations, you listed a bunch of validations. This is really something for an external audit, and it's great that you review your validations during your internal audit, but it's kind of confusing because the instructions are for approval of validations by the external audit team. So how do you ensure that your validations that have not yet been externally reviewed are actually reviewed for your next external audit? She's still here? Okay.
Well, we go through Section 8 and make sure that all of the correct studies were conducted for each of the different, for the internal validations, the material mods, and the performance checks. Did I answer your question?
Not really. I guess, because you listed them here on your internal validation, on Appendix E, how, is there assurance that they're not going to get confused as being reviewed and approved? So, I mean, my suggestion is like, in Appendix E, either don't list the validations that you reviewed, because it implies that, you know, they're approved.
Right,
And the
right.
instructions say external audit team approval.
Yeah.
Or make
Okay,
a notation, this is an internal audit not to be considered approved by an external audit or something.
Yeah, okay, so I guess in the future, we just won't fill out that section for internal audits. But whenever we have an external audit, we always go back to our last external audit and make a list of all the validations we've conducted during that period in between the two external audits.
I think it probably would be better not to do it there. I think I recall this issue coming up once before with another laboratory, that they were listing validations as approved validations on this page. I looked in the new QAS document, and they don't really give any instructions, specific instructions for internal audits. They're really focused on external audits. But since it does say validations by the external audit team, maybe you should just leave it blank.
Okay, we will.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, does everybody agree?
Or they could put a separate page, like say internal,
Well, I
like
noticed
just put it
how
on a separate page so it's not on here if they wanted to document
what
it.
Monroe County did, I think it was Monroe County, they made a statement on page 1 of their QAS.
Yeah, that they didn't.
That they reviewed
those.
them,
But they
by the
didn't.
technical leader reviewed them, but this was an internal
Yep.
audit, and should not, to make it clear. But this looks very official, and I don't know, somehow it could cause some
This is
confusion.
meant to memorialize that it's been
Yes,
reviewed, right?
Evaluated and approved.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
good.
you, yeah. So that completes these reviews. And I should apologise to people in the back of the room for not recognising the ones who are in attendance from the different labs. So welcome. I hope you were pleased with our affirmation of your reports. Thank you. All right, very interesting. So we have some old business to be able to talk about. So under the partial match, so I looked in the minutes and there was no real detail there about the discussion last time.
Right.
So you're going to fill it in?
Yeah, I just give a verbal
Sure.
update every meeting. For partial match, there have been no updates since our last meeting, so I'll just reiterate those statistics once again. There were 93 names requested, 49 names released. Additional testing could not confirm the other 44. So 47 investigations have closed and 2 active investigations still for partial match.
How many currently under investigation? What was the last statement?
2 active investigations.
So you said
Yep.
47 were closed.
Were closed, and 2 were still
Meaning,
active.
can you say what that means? Does that mean that the partial match led to some outcome?
Either it aided in the investigation, in 2 cases there were convictions.
Okay. So that's very interesting. Thank you.
Jill, my numbers match yours, except I also have written that there was 1 pending. After you said 47 investigations closed, I have 1 pending and then 2 active.
So I think there was a conviction,
Okay.
maybe in that one, since,
So where did you see that, Catherine?
These are my notes from the last meeting in
Oh,
December,
okay,
so I was
okay.
following along
Sure,
with
yeah.
our numbers.
So I didn't see that in the minutes. Those statistics. Is that appropriate to have them recorded?
I think in the past we haven't put them in the minutes,
I
we've just
think it would
referred
have
to the
been.
video.
I think it would have been interesting to see what's actually happening.
And could we get more detail on these that are resulting?
The convictions, we
Yeah.
can definitely, the convictions would be public knowledge at that point, open investigations.
I think I would like to
Yeah.
see the numbers. I think that's relevant.
I think the minutes are a little too streamlined.
Okay.
I know you can watch the meeting on video, but
Surely.
if you don't have time, it's nice to have.
No, I think it.
Plus, we have to go back and look at this, so I end up having to I open the old, look at what went on in the last meeting to remind myself.
So if we could do that, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Listen, that was partial match numbers you
Partial
just gave
match.
us. All right.
Yes, sir.
So familial searches.
For familial search, there is an update. As of today, we've received 37 applications in total. That number breakdown is there were 28 unique applications, 1 renewal, and 6 resubmissions. 11 were rejected. 2 are currently in process, just received. 23 are approved. Excuse me. 11 searches or trainings have been completed, so results have gone out on those. 12 searches in queue, and 1 was withdrawn.
And are these taking advantage of the new kits that are looking at more than 20 loci, or are they limited to the 13 locus profiles or the 15 locus profiles? Do we know that?
We would have to call the state places based on the current validation that we approved in 2017, that the DNA subcommittee saw and approved in 2017.
I thought that referred to 10 markers.
So that's the minimum's 10?
I'm not exactly sure. We could call them so they can
I'd like
speak
to hear
to.
more
It should
about
be in
that.
our,
I think this is such an important area. I think we need
I
to.
think it was 10.
Yeah. That you needed to have at least 10. So it could be the small kits or it could be the big.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if they're using,
Global filer?
because some
or-
of their profiles, they've typed 13 markers, some 15, and some now 20 plus.
Well,
So are they searching all of those profiles or not?
I believe it's based on the original validation that you approved, but do you want to call them now or
Yeah.
call them when we talk about the policy
Well,
review?
could maybe just wait a minute. So I think yes, but can we just wait a minute?
Sure, yeah.
I was going to say.
so most now, Fred, would probably be using the larger kits because of the CODIS requirements. But you're saying, could they be old profiles?
But, so are these searches of the New York State database?
Yeah.
So that database won't have all these new markers in
Right,
it, will it?
Right.
Right.
So I'm not sure.
They will over time,
They
but not
will,
yet. Yeah.
some of them will.
Yes.
Right.
That's,
But
that's,
at least 10
Yeah.
required doesn't specify
Which ones?
which ones.
That's right.
So if it's some of the newer ones, that's acceptable. But it doesn't, it can be one of the old 13.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to know what.
Well, I am
what
too.
the
I think for
practice is.
a current, for a recent typing, you would think they would use all the markers they had. But for an older case, if that's all they had, then they should use those, providing it was at least 10. Is that the current state?
That's the way I
what
understood it.
I'm
Yeah.
looking at it now.
Well, what concerns me is the possibility that they have, let's say, 100,000 new profiles that have been typed for 20-plus markers that aren't included in the cohort of samples being run with a familial search, where they're calculating LRs. Because they validated earlier on a smaller data set. I want to be sure in my own mind that they're taking advantage of.
I think the question is, how is the search being conducted?
Yeah.
Is it using all the profiles in the database?
Yes, exactly.
All the markers they have typed?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So how many, so is New York State one of the very few states who do familial searches?
No, there are about 15 states now.
15.
Yeah,
So it's one of the very few, 15 out of 50.
yeah.
So I think it would be helpful to ask them, and Fred, you can lead the questioning, but just, I think we need to know a little more about how they conduct the search. Which markers are they using from the evidence, and which profiles are they looking against in the data? Is that correct? That you're in? Yeah.
So we'll call.
Were there other
I had a
issues?
business. Is this a new business or an old business item? Do you want to?
Well, I don't know. This is coming up under old business. I mean, this is a question arising from our report, from our the verbal update.
So who do we get on the phone? Ray?
Tom Leach is the number
Yeah,
of
yeah,
contact that
okay.
we have.
Thank you.
In the meantime, I'll just read from the policy that states the crime scene DNA profile derives from a single source and contains at least 10 of the CODIS core loci.
Yes, so that's ambiguous because that number's changed.
Well, at least.
Good morning. This is Tom Leach.
Good morning, Tom. You're on the phone with the DNA subcommittee?
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Yep, Dr. Bieber has a question.
Hi, Tom. It's Fred Bieber. How are you?
Good morning, Dr. Bieber. How you doing?
Excellent. Thank you very much. I have a couple questions for you and your team about the familial search practices in your lab. Can you answer a few questions?
I sure can. I was watching the DNA subcommittee on conference, so I saw the questions that you have.
So let me make a introductory statement, and you can correct me where I may be going astray. I understand that some of the profiles in the Estes of convicted offenders in New York have been typed for, say, 13 markers. Another cohort of samples have been typed with a newer kit, say, for 15 markers, and yet more recently you may be typing another group of newer samples for over 20 markers. Am I correct in that assumption?
That is correct.
Okay.
So
yeah. And can you give us a rough estimate of how many convicted offender samples have been typed with each of those three sets of profiles?
I don't have an estimate of, on hand right now, I don't have an estimate of the partitions of global filer, co-filer, and identifiler. However, to answer your question, all offender profiles in the database are being searched as part of the familial search. However, with the Global Filer Express profiles that are in the database, the only loci are being used are up to 15 loci that would be captured in an identifier loci based on the validations that we did previously with Co-Filer Plus and Identifiler.
So when did you...
Excuse me, could you just say that again? I'm not really sure I got that correctly. This is Bruce Weir. Thank you. Could you just repeat what your previous answer?
Sure. So for a familial search, we are utilizing all offenders in the database. However, there are some offenders that we have in the database that have a consistent mixture due to maybe a chimera issue. They would be omitted from this search. However, all others are being searched, and that would include Co-Filer Plus, Co-Filer and Profiler Plus profiles, Identifiler profiles, as well as Global Filer profiles, and the expanded loci profiles. However, they're all being included. However, the loci that are being searched are up to the 15 loci that you would see in an Identifiler kit.
And so how many samples, I've asked you this question before, can you give me any idea, when did you start using the newer kits that type more than 15 markers?
We started using the kits in March of 2017, the new kits.
So almost 3 years.
And for us, that would be Global Filer Express.
Okay. And are you planning to do any validation so that you can use all those markers?
Yes, we are. So one of the limitations that our program currently has is it doesn't allow us to utilize the expanded set. So we are looking at using the CODIS application now has a familial search component that would allow us to possibly move from our current software to CODIS to do the familial search calculations.
This is version 8.
However, we're currently evaluating that, and that's something that we're working on at present time.
Okay.
So it's Bruce Weir again. So this is helpful. Thank you. So I've got a couple of little questions, and I'm sorry I appear naive. You talk about the offender database. Does the database contain only convicted offender profiles?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Dr.
Yes,
Weir?
does your database contain profiles only from convicted offenders?
Yes, the offender database is only from convicted offenders.
Okay, thank you. And then once you've done a familial search, you talked about CODIS. Do you proceed to use the CODIS data for your familial searching?
Yeah, the CODIS, so for familiar search, the offender profiles in CODIS are exported out of CODIS and then searched in a we're using the Denver familiar search software.
This was using the...
So the search is not done, the familiar search is not done within CODIS, it's done outside of CODIS in a separate software.
But it's using the entire CODIS database?
It's using the entire state database. Yes, state CODIS database for offenders.
So that's not quite what I asked, but I think that helps me. So you're only searching for offenders from New York State for familial searching?
Yes.
So,
if I can try and clarify.
Thank you.
What was your specific question then in regards to the database?
Well, I'm sorry, it's my confusion. You talked about using CODIS, but that was, it's not that you're using the CODIS database in total. You're using the New York State profiles on CODIS?
Correct. So in the CODIS database, there's different indices. Obviously, there's a forensic index. There's multiple indices. We're using the offender index, exporting that out, and then that is what's being searched as for familiar search.
So I'm revealing my naivety again. So how does that subset, that data, differ from the New York State offender database?
It's not a difference. I guess I might be miscommunicating that. So what's being exported out of the state CODIS database is the offender index. So that is the index that contains all the convicted, the qualified convicted offender DNA profiles.
So if
Only
I may,
those are being exported out, which is, upwards of over 700,000 samples.
So it's only New York State's convicted offenders.
Yes. So I think, thank you.
Yes.
What I'm struggling with is why are you using CODIS at all? If you have your own offender database, why are you going through CODIS?
What's called the SDIS of CODIS. So CODIS is a software?
Yes.
So,
excuse me. Yes, I realize that. Yeah.
We're not using CODIS to do the familial search.
Thank you.
However, we need to export the offender profiles from the offender database out of CODIS to be able to search it in the familiar search software, the Denver familiar search software that we are using.
Thank you. And what documentation do you have on the Denver software?
Documentation?
Yes. What does the software do?
Oh, so the Denver software is conducting likelihood LR rate calculations.
Sure. Is it using the SWGDAM guidelines for familial searching? I mean, I'm finding difficulty in getting published records of how familial searching is conducted. The SWGDAM guidelines are published, and I'm curious to know whether the Denver software is using them.
So, in regards to the SWGDAM guidelines, are you talking about like EKR and EMR? Or,
yes. Mm-hmm.
We are not doing EKR and EMR calculations. We are doing likelihood ratio calculations.
That seems to be inconsistent with your policies, however.
Our familial search policy, or our partial match policy, refers to the EKR and EMR.
Okay, sorry.
That's a separate policy from the familial search. The familial search refers to the approved software that we are utilizing, which in our case is the Denver familial search software.
Thank you. So I am curious to know what the Denver software does, and I'd be certainly, I'd appreciate it, learning a little more, maybe a reference or a manual or a publication. I mean, so I'm sure, I'm not, this is not a criticism, I'm sure you've done I'm sure you're using appropriately validated and sound software, but I'm curious to know what it is doing.
What I can do is I can put you on with our technical coordinator that did was part of the validation for Familiar Search, and he can just give you an overview of how the software is being used to do the likelihood ratio calculations, if that's okay.
That would be fine. I don't want to do a long discussion with them, though. I'm really looking for a document, but that would be great if you could do that.
Well, we certainly can follow up with DCGS on that.
I think that would be
make sure
appropriate.
that you get that information.
That would be really helpful. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Dr. Weir.
And really quick, I just want to chime in that the policy that I read you was on the wrong tab. It was the partial match policy with the 10 core loci, not the familiar search. I would like to correct that. Thank you. Sorry about that. Too many tabs.
So are we still on the line with the...
So Tom, when it's convenient, Tom, I think it would be helpful, at least to me, to have some kind of breakdown roughly of how many convicted offender samples have been typed with each of the different kits.
Okay. Let me ask if anyone here has that information.
Oh, I don't need it this minute. No.
Oh, okay. That's fine then. I certainly can do that and provide that information along with the document that Dr. Weir has requested.
Thank you.
And has there been any discussion, I bet a budget would preclude this, of going back to samples that have been typed with fewer markers to retype them with the advanced kits? Or to add Y STRs from some point forward.
All right, so you're saying going back retroly to add the expanded markers to all the samples in the offender database?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Has there been any discussion about that?
There hasn't. There's been no. We haven't considered going back and doing that. That would be a large number of samples that have to go back. However, anytime that we do additional analysis, whether it's for familiar search or it's for a state hit confirmations, we're doing all those in the new kit. So that information is getting updated in the database for those DNA profiles.
And one last question, Tom. What about Ys going forward? A number of states and counties are now routinely typing Y markers in addition to the autosomal markers for their convicted offenders or arrestees. Is there any discussion about doing that in New York State?
There hasn't been any discussions about doing that, I guess, operationally. However, internally we have talked about, could that be a possibility? And certainly we would have to assess that, and address funding for that. But we do recognize with, familiar search going forward, especially with familiar search, that the additional Y information is valuable, and that if we build that into our practice early on, that obviously that would streamline things later on as that database increases. And if we already have the Ys completed, it could, decrease turnaround times for familiar searches.
Great. This is very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you.
The next item is the update on the CODIS bulletins. Well,
Sure.
we have Tom on the phone. Do we want to ask him about that, or?
Yeah. Tom, I said I would speak for you, but you're on the phone, so you might as well say the same sentence I was going to say for you.
Yep.
So in regards to we don't have any updates, any CODIS bulletin updates that would need to be relayed in relation to any, major quality issue. Certainly there's CODIS bulletins that are always produced, but I think the big concern was that, is there anything that would be worthy of passing on to the DNA subcommittee in regards to quality issues? And there hasn't been any.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye, Tom.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So that concludes old business.
Could I go back to the familial search?
Please.
Using the Denver software. I don't know, I can't remember that this committee has ever looked at the Denver software.
So thank you, Ken, and I think that's why we need to see it. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you said that, and I'm hoping that we'll get to see some details.
So
I
they
guess
gave a demonstration.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because this was actually approved when originally? I was trying to read.
2017.
2017 was the first time it was approved. And at that time, that was sort of my question, was there a presentation?
There was.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you
then
weren't
that-
here.
There's an executive summary we can recirculate. If
That
we
would be
don't.
good.
Yeah.
No, I think we need more than that. I think we need some documentation.
Or whatever.
This went to
Do you have
Albany.
the presentations from that time? You know, whatever, I think that'd be really helpful to get
Yeah, who
online,
visited
to
those?
catch
I
everybody
did,
up.
and someone was-
Yeah, because it seemed like this was a
Did we go
reapproval.
to Albany?
Is that the stage we're in with this?
I think they're
We
just
were
looking
in
at
Albany.
updating the
It
document.
was-
Oh, okay. I
When
see.
they gave us a presentation.
It was a joint meeting, I believe. I mean, it predates me, but Shelley can speak.
Dr. Beaver's correct.
Yeah.
There were
Okay.
a few of you who went to the Albany lab independently, not as a group.
Yeah.
Because for
Right.
open meeting issue.
Okay,
But yeah, some of you did go
Yeah.
at that time
so
for a
those are a
presentation
couple
to
of,
review the software on site.
I got you.
Yeah, I don't know.
those neurons are ones that I've lost.
There was also a presentation.
I think there was a presentation. I don't know if it was here or if it was a special meeting where the families came as well.
There was no software at that meeting.
Okay.
But at the validation approval meeting, there was
There
a
was here.
PowerPoint presentation that the state police gave.
Okay.
An
Okay, I
executive
don't-
summary and a more complete validation document as well.
So you can just point us to that somehow? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Lovely. Thank you.
Everyone, because I do think there are 3 of members who were not present in 2017.
Yeah.
I think we should all probably look at it.
Okay,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you, Ken. All right, shall we proceed with new business? The annual laboratory summaries. So we've got documents for informational, and this summarizes 2019 documentation. It's been reviewed and attested to by the laboratory director. And do we have any questions from those documents? It's a fairly extensive list of documents.
No.
I just have one question on page 737. At the bottom of that table. On May 9th, what is ACK?
Acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement, okay.
SCK. Good catch. And there was room in the line to put the whole word there, right? Thank you. All right, so everybody's happy with those. And then there's a policy review. So, so now we're coming back, I guess, to the old business. So the partial match and familial search policies are required to be reviewed. So, Jill, can you update us on those reviews, please?
So we had discussed at the last meeting, as well as the commission meeting, that we would be taking a look at the partial match policy as well as the familial search policy. The partial match policy, so we distributed the documents and asked for your feedback. We've kind of summarized that here into some talking points. I'm going to maybe leave off some of the formatting because I don't think that that's really necessary to discuss. It's just, you know, thank you for your input on that. We will definitely make those changes. But I've highlighted, starting with partial match, some of the talking points that we were looking at. one of which was, first I'll start with the removal of the specific language that states that the policy must be reviewed every 2 years, as we are required to look at the regs every 5 years anyway, so that if an area of concern does come up, we can obviously bring that to light and have a discussion at that time for a policy review. It doesn't need to be specifically stated in it. And I'm not quite sure why that was. Again, a lot of this does predate me, so forgive me, and please chime in if there is back information that I'm not aware of as to why that specifically was put in there. But for consistency, we don't have that in familial search, and I would like to.
It was a new procedure at that time.
It
I'm
was at
sure
that
that we
time,
were,
yeah.
people were uncertain about where it was going.
Correct,
So
yeah.
it made sense, I think, at that time.
And so at this point, we can consider removal of that 2-year. So that was one point that was brought up for discussion. And something else was the removal of attachment A that has the calculations. Again, I think this was new at the time, so having that clearly stated out was something that we wanted. Again, up for discussion. It would require us to then incorporate the definitions of the EKR and EMR in the policy, whereas now it just refers to the attachment. We could integrate that language into the policy and do away with attachment A.
You wanted discussion on that. So, I think it would have been helpful to have a reference to a publication, rather than have this document serve as a definition for these statistics. I would prefer to refer to a published record or some other document, so that this wasn't the authoritative document for these calculations. I don't know what other people think.
Wasn't there a SWIG-DAM?
That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm saying. This is not referred to here.
Yeah, certainly, if that attachment is removed, it seems like a reference is needed then.
That's right.
To explain it.
Yeah.
And then you did say that we would put the definitions within the policy, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
We can do that. Yeah.
We need our definitions.
So addition of the definitions and reference for the calculation. Okay.
Are you gonna bring this up for a vote are you gonna come back and do that?
So this is, again, just discussion. At this point, we haven't drafted any official language. That's the time when we would come up for a vote and for the recommendation to go to the commission based on any drafted language that.
So what is the timing on that, Jill?
Ideally, the next meeting.
Okay.
I would like to have that.
Okay.
But again, it would depend on conversation that we have. And
Thank you.
How lengthy.
Thank you.
And I like the idea too of less time, or allowing the review to be on the same time schedule.
Yeah.
as others.
I think it made sense.
Yeah.
At that time,
Yeah,
but
sure.
I think now,
Yeah.
things are stabilizing.
Yeah.
Although New York State's clearly leading among the
Yeah.
leaders. Very good. Thank you.
So those were the two major discussion
That
points
was- that was-
I had for a partial match.
Oh, yes, and then you're going to go on to familial matching? Are you?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
If there's no more discussion on partial match, we'll go to familial searching. We had two major points of discussion for that. I'll start with the latter of that, which is to streamline the process. We would like to see the MOU language incorporated into the initial application. The individuals that sign the MOU are also the same individuals that are signing the application. There has been instances where the holdup has been getting these signatures again from these individuals, and the miscommunication of them thinking they're in the queue and they're not, they're waiting for the MOU. That's what's really the triggering factor for, we need to have them on board with all of that. So I think one of the things we wanted to do was add that language into the application so it streamlines the process, removing that step. This, however, would require both a regulation and a policy change. But that is something that, we could draft that language and move that forward. The reg process is a bit more involved, as special counsel has advised me. But that was something else that was brought up.
So would it be clear, so it would still go through the normal review?
Yes.
To decide if it's suitable?
Correct.
So would the MOU be clear that this is pending, you wouldn't want the investigators to think the opposite now, that because they've signed this, then it is definitely going to be.
Right, so, and then subsequent to the application steps, then we involve the state CODIS, and that would be the next mark. That is also part of the application process. So for that to be completed totally, then move forward and add it to the queue.
Okay.
There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and just for the person who's signing the MOU, you might want to look at what it says or make it clear to them that this isn't necessarily the final thing, right? That it's not necessarily going to happen just because they signed it.
Yeah, it's the just in case. I like the idea of only getting one signature at
Yes,
one time,
agreed.
because in this day and age of electronic documents flying, to actually get MOUs, or to get two documents actually signed, can be problematic. I think you're saying, though, just because you've signed an MOU doesn't mean you're going to get it.
It's going to be
It's going to
searched.
happen.
Right, and so I think,
And potentially that could just be a letter that you put on the top
Yeah.
that says this is the process and you're signing this and,
You're signing this pending,
Yeah.
it will occur pending
Yeah.
acceptance of the application or whatever.
and we have expanded our familial search training resources and initial information resources on our website. So we're really trying to assist in getting the best work product up front so that we can streamline and get things moving. One of the things that we obviously have been speaking heavily with our partners, the state police, and is local lab involvement on the early end of the process to determine sample eligibility. And those are things that we are looking at the application phase. But again, the application is kind of separate of the policy, but we would incorporate that in.
You mentioned earlier, Jill, that there were 11 applications that were rejected.
Yes.
Did that have anything to do with the way the policy is written?
It has to do with the sample requirements.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was more often than not the way that they were rejected if they didn't have a full profile or YSTR at all at that point.
So, but I watched the commission meeting last night, and two of the rejections were, one was because a different state applied, and one was for familiar searching for unidentified remains.
That's my next point.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I was going to say, why can't we why not another state?
So based on the way that the penal law code is written into the policy, and also that it must, I think, reside in our state database. If it's an out-of-state sample, it currently would not reside in our state database. I mean, these are topics that we have discussed. We can get the state police on also if they would like to, because I also don't feel comfortable speaking for them on their portion of the process. But I do know that the specific penal codes in that out-of-state application were an issue.
Okay. And then unidentified remains.
And
is
then that's my
something
next point, which is we would look to have the addition of unidentified human remains, and which would incorporate sample requirements specific to that. The state police has recommended, and again, this is all in discussion and not formalized in draft for vote, single source recovered from a deceased individual whose identity is unknown, reside in Estes, and having been searched against the DNA profiles of offenders contained in the state DNA databank.
Sounds good. And then the same profile requirements.
Same profile.
Yeah. Yep.
And then another thing was the lab director mentioned that there could be some refinement in the process, and I didn't know whether it had anything to do with our policy or whether it was something to do with the software or.
So I went and met with the state police prior to, because I also wanted to get their input in knowing what they want. And actually, one of the subcommittee members did say, well, what does the state police, what would help them? We did have discussion, and it's my impression that it's not policy-driven, other than the fact that they're restricted based on the validation that's currently been approved and that they're using. I'm not sure if Ray is, I know Tom is available via phone. I'm not sure if Ray is available or not. So if you want to specifically ask him and have him weigh in, we can definitely do that.
I mean, I don't know that if they could just list what are the issues, and to determine whether there's anything that in doing the policy revision could be addressed in the that it's a problem somewhere there, or whether it's just, outside of the policy, just.
They have not expressed that to me, but I think it would behoove us to get him on the phone and have you ask, just to make sure I'm not misunderstanding what was said to me.
Good morning, Tom Leach speaking.
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Tom, you're back on the phone with the subcommittee.
Hi, Tom. This is Allison.
Good morning again.
Tom, I watched the commission meeting on video last night, and when Ray mentioned some things about some refinements that could be made with regards to the familial searching. I was wondering if any of those relate to our current policy, or are these issues outside of the policy, some other part of the process? Is it something we can address in our policy revision?
In regards to your discussion on UHR, that was part of what he was alluding to, I think, in refinement. That would require some policy provisions, as Dr. Dooley has mentioned. The other refinement had to do with the ability to process familiar search on, say, a partial profile, processing familiar search that involves female profiles. Those are things that we are looking at now to expand on the validation, but that would be more at the validation level. And I believe the policy speaks to specifically speaks to the fact that we're using the approved validation parameters for familiar search. So what we would be doing is doing those assignments, probably providing that update to the DNA subcommittee, but I don't believe they would require a policy change, at least at this time.
But the unidentified human remains certainly would. Yes.
That would, because in the policy itself, it speaks directly to a forensic type profile.
Yes.
And if we wanted to introduce the UHR, we would just need to add that to the policy.
That was my question.
So for female remains, are you using mitochondrial typing? Or are you thinking about...
We are not using mitochondrial. So currently, right now, the additional analysis that we're doing is YSTRs. So at the present time, familiar search is being processed strictly for male.
Okay, thank you. Further questions for Tom? Okay, thank you again, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome, Dr. Weir.
Thank you.
So those were the two major discussion points that we had noted for familial search policy revisions, and that's all I have.
So I have a question about the mitochondrial.
Yes.
So they may not do mitochondrial, but can they contract it out to, say, another laboratory? I mean, we have at least one laboratory in this state that does mitochondrial. Is there a restriction to that in the policy?
The way I read the policy?
I mean, the policy talks about YSDR, and it seems strange.
Yeah,
not to have
it did mention female, but it didn't.
Right,
It didn't. You know, does it disallow contracting out for mito?
I think there would need to be a revision to the validation at that point, because the validation was based only on
Right. It would
YSTR.
certainly it would have to be validated, but once validated. I mean, they wouldn't have to necessarily validate mitochondrial DNA there on site at the New York State Police Lab, couldn't they do outsourced mitochondrial?
So I think I remember we talked about this, and it says perform YSTR testing on the candidate samples if the forensic DNA profiles from a male. So it doesn't preclude it. I think
Yeah.
it's in practice, it's just not happening.
Yeah.
But I don't think it precludes it from the policy.
I think 4 might also state that, if appropriate, ensuring additional testing is performed on the
Yeah, maybe
candidate
that
sample.
covers it.
Yeah, I remember that being discussed at, I think I remember that, yeah.
They're saying,
I'm sure,
yeah.
it's just I'm sure.
No, and, but I think, it sounds like the two changes are really important, good changes to make, so I think we should consider doing that.
Well, except this out-of-state one may be difficult. is
Oh,
what
no,
I'm
I meant
hearing.
the
human
human
remains.
remains and then the
Yeah.
MOUs.
Yeah. Yeah. So the out-of-state we can't do.
Yeah.
That's a different
We
issue.
could do it, it's just gonna take more, a regulation change.
That's
Well, that as well. But
Yeah.
I would have to look further into it.
Yeah.
To say, yeah.
beyond the
Yeah.
county.
I don't see why it has to be precluded.
I mean, if you
It's-
can, solve a crime for an out-of-state
Right.
profile, I mean, should try, I mean, it might take a while to make those changes, but it seems like we should be
Certainly.
open to that.
Well, was it
We
the
know
issue
cri-
that what they might call a crime of this type isn't necessarily the same definition of a crime in New York, right?
Based
So
on
that
penal.
Unless
Yes.
those crimes were
somebody would have to say,
were
well,
stated in the policy as to which ones that would be allowed.
which could be
be
tricky
state by
because
state.
you'd have to do, so you'd have to have some really general saying, well, a homicide is described this way in New York, and, it could be described another way in any other.
But unidentified human remains found in
Oh, yeah,
southern Connecticut could easily be
Somebody.
related
Yeah.
to somebody in New York.
So are you saying add something in the policy, maybe it's not in this policy, but that would allow for it if,
for unidentified human remains, but not crimes, to solve crimes.
Yeah, that might be the first step anyway.
I think we would need to look into
Yeah.
that for sure, because
Yeah.
it is a slippery slope. There are, you may be aware, there are states that banned familial searching. And
Yes.
we would need to
Yes.
take
Right,
that
yeah.
into effect as well as
Right.
any other legislation that's out there, so.
Oh, it's complicated. It's
Very
just that I don't see that it has to be prohibited.
Well, it's interesting because you're really saying it's one set of rules for when we're trying to implicate somebody in a crime versus the more maybe potential humanitarian act of identifying human remains, right? So they're kind of separate questions, and you could use these approaches to do the humanitarian one that may not conflict with the policies in place for the implication of someone for a crime. I think that's an interesting conversation because technology is the same. Like the science
yeah.
would be the same. It's just which question you're answering. So one question you might want to be more, I don't know, protective of or concerned about versus the identification of remains would, fill a different space. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd just make a suggestion that you look into the policy issues and come back to it next time with whether there's something we can suggest that would allow this. Or it's just too complicated to even.
Well, no, I mean, it's a good idea because, I think it's a good
Where
idea.
there's a will,
because
there's a way.
People move around, so someone could literally die and disappear in DC. We had a recent homeless case, for example, that, with greater technology, they were able to identify an individual whose their entire family had lost. And I think that individual was originally from New York, ended up in DC in poverty, homeless, died. Nobody knew who she was. She had mental illness, and later I think the family was found many years later using some of the technologies, and I think she was from New York. So it's sort of a different question that the technology's now there, would we preclude people from trying to close that gap versus maybe the more concern,
Right, now it's searching
Yeah.
only the criminal database.
Yeah.
But lots of families have a criminal in them.
Well, it's just, I mean, we're looking in a whole different way at what data can be used to help identify people. I
Right.
guess, so, anyway, just a thought. But it's also potentially more work, right? So
Resources.
Yeah, resources and all that. That becomes a very important question too.
Right. We'll look into that.
Yeah.
I think that would be good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. All righty, so that was the new business. So the disclosures, there was a disclosure from Onondaga County, and so involving a sample switch, which was discovered, and apparently actions have been taken. Do we have any comments on the either the action or the remedy?
Is there a root cause analysis that's associated with this?
It just happened.
Yeah,
It
not
just
yet.
happened, so they
It's in
haven't.
a month ago, yeah.
Just the initial.
Is someone,
Okay.
is someone from the lab here?
They're available over the phone.
I'm just curious, at what stage are they in their?
I think it would be good to clarify that.
Yeah.
Given,
So how could a mistake happen? Is that what you're asking?
It says corrective action.
Hello?
Hi, Dr. Corrado?
Yes.
You're on the phone with the DNA subcommittee.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. I wasn't answering it because I saw it was a 315 number, so I assumed it was a different call. So I apologize.
There's a few questions about your disclosure.
Okay.
Could you, this is Allison. Could you just go through what happened and where, and I saw you have a cause analysis statement here in your letter from January 6th, but where are you at right now in your cause analysis and your investigation of the matter?
Yes, so we detected this issue through our laboratory's reanalysis program, which is part of our quality assurance. So this particular sample was reanalyzed. The results of the reanalysis came in at the very end of December. So as soon as we realized that, we went ahead and made our notifications to all the police agencies, the district attorney's office, and then obviously to accrediting body and to DCJS. We started a cause analysis. We're in the process right now. We're working through all the different aspects of that. Part of the problem is that this occurred a while ago, so it's hard to know, but we're looking at all the steps in the process and trying to determine what could have happened. We have already determined that it occurred at the extraction stage. It could have been at, as you know, the extraction or the amplification or after that, and we've determined it happened at the extraction stage. So we're looking at that, looking at all the processes. So we're really not completed with that. The other thing we're doing is we're reviewing previous cases to determine if this is, an isolated or possibly systemic issue. And we're working on, once we determine what we think happened, could have happened, we'll put in a corrective action, to hopefully mitigate it in the future. But it's really just too early. Like I said, we detected it, right between Christmas and New Year's, and we've been working on it since. So it takes a while to gather all the information, determine how many cases were completed, that kind of thing. So we're really just in the midst of it right now.
Fred Bieber here. Dr. Corrado, could you explain for me the reanalysis component of your work? That sounds interesting. When and how do you do that?
So it's just part of one of the aspects of our quality assurance system is in disciplines where it's feasible, it's not just for the DNA discipline, it's for all the disciplines in our laboratory. We randomly choose cases each year from each analyst to reanalyze. And, you know, we typically try to pick cases that we know there's enough, particularly in DNA, cases where we know there's enough samples, so we don't want to consume extra sample or anything like that. But we reanalyze cases for each analyst, and then, you know, we compare the results. And it allows us a couple things to see, you know, obviously it allows us to, as we see here, to see if there's a problem with the case, you know, if we don't get similar results. So that's mainly what the purpose is. But secondly, it allows us to compare the documentation that analysts are taking and things like that. So it's kind of a nice QC system in that way that we can look for areas of improvement. You know, if one person is maybe indicating more information than another, you know, maybe that's something we want to say from now on, we should all be doing it this way, or that kind of thing. So we've been doing that for quite a long time. Off the top of my head, I don't know, I would say maybe since 2010, but I'm not sure of the exact date, but we've been doing that for a while just as part of our normal QA system.
Mm-hmm. Were the parties involved new hires?
No, this person is actually a person with many years of experience. They do a lot of other things. They have a lot of other duties in the lab, so actually they kind of do less casework than some of the other people whose main duties are casework, but the person has many years of experience, unfortunately.
This is Jennifer Smith. Hi, how are you?
Hi, good.
So I see here you're reviewing all cases analyzed in 2019. Is that between proficiency tests, or did you extend beyond that?
So, thank you for mentioning that. I should have said that. So this analyst, as I said, has been working a long time and completes 2 proficiency tests a year, and there's been no issues with the proficiency test this past year or before that. So we just decided, because this happened, the original case was worked around March of 2019. We just are looking at all the cases that person worked in 2019. We're looking at all of them, and some of them wouldn't require reanalysis for various reasons. You know, like, for example, there could be a case where we just had to redo a sample to get the extra loci, you know, the 15 to 22 loci for some reason. So we can see right there that the sample, because it matched the results from previous. There may be other cases. There are other cases that we did reanalysis already as part of our reanalysis program. So, you know, we just looked at all the cases in 2019, and then any of them that it seems like that we could do reanalysis on, we are. So that's where we're starting, and then, you know, we'll see where we go from there. If we feel like there's a need to do more or not.
Great, thanks. And yeah, I appreciate that, because that can be an interesting decision to make. How far back do you go, and when do you start them? So.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And, you know, like, we've not had this instance occur before, so, you know, we're looking at that. You know, we're also, again, just looking at the number of cases this person works. And as I said, they did complete 2 proficiency tests in 2019 and had no issues with those.
Right. Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
To be continued.
I guess just as because having gone through some reworks ourselves, do you have sort of a timeline for your root cause analysis where you're anticipating when you might?
So I mean, we're really just trying to do this as soon as possible. So we've already initiated the reanalysis. We've recalled the evidence back, and we've already initiated the retesting of almost all of them, I would say. We're just waiting on some other evidence to come in. And we're currently working on the root cause. So I'm hopeful that, you know, within the next, I don't want to say because it depends on what we find, but assuming if everything works smoothly, probably within 60 days we should be completed with everything.
And is an analyst offline for this period of time?
yes, they are not performing any laboratory work.
And then my only final question, because I think there's really no way that any, I don't know, tech review verification would have caught this, right? So there's no concern you have for, fallout, I guess, another analyst being involved in this. You're pretty sure it's focused on this one analyst.
In our laboratory, it's just, one analyst carries the case through from start to finish. So, is that your question?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, we have an issue where we had a firearms examination problem, and so we had to not only look at the original examiner, but also the person that did the verification tech review. That was just my question. So.
Right. So, in this instance, it was the original analyst that it would appear made the switch, and because it was just a one sample, no suspect case, the tech reviewer there would be no way for anyone to realize that there was a different profile. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. Just wanted to check. Thanks.
Okay.
One last question from Fred here. Can you orient us to at what steps in the process you have someone witness tube transfers and labeling?
Yes. Our policy is that all of the steps within the process, anytime there is a transfer, someone verifies the tube order. So that would include transfers that occur in the extraction, which in this particular extraction, there were 2 transfers. If there was a concentration step, that would involve 2 transfers. There were not in this particular case. The amplification step we verify and is put on the genetic analyzer. So we do have a step for verification, which is why the root cause analysis is a little bit harder, because we feel like we should have had something in place that this should have been detected. Does that answer the question? I'm sorry.
So this is Mandy Sozer. I just want to go back to what Jennifer asked. So if there was a sample switch, do you think that involved the misplacement of tubes, and then someone didn't check that during the verification, or didn't catch it during the verification?
So, I mean, that's really what we're trying to determine. I mean, I don't know how to say that. It's possible. I mean, it's possible that what we're doing is checking the order of the tubes, right? So, and we have the verifier, the different people verified at different steps. The staff are very diligent, both the analyst and not mixing, attempting to not mix up the samples, and certainly the verifier. So, everyone involved feels like they did everything correctly. We've looked at, any other possibilities of, was the wrong label put on a tube, but that also is verified. So it's really hard to say. I mean, that's why we're struggling with this. It wasn't a large sample set. It was a very small sample set. It was 3 samples and reagent blank.
Wow.
And so, it's just that really that's what we're struggling with is, how did this happen in what way? But, in speaking with everyone involved, everyone feels like they did what they were supposed to do, which is obviously somewhere there was a problem.
All right, further questions?
Nope, we look forward to your root cause analysis. We will all learn from that. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. That was helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this? So will we hear more as they report? Okay. Thank you. All right. So Suffolk County, and we've got some folks here from Suffolk County. Is that right? No. Okay. So something about this was closing out an incorrect Q to Q classification, non-conformance, and we asked for further information. There's a memo now, further information. Have we all looked at that?
Right, so And just so everyone knows this, so this was closed out at the last meeting, but you guys had requested additional information just to follow up on it. So we've provided that. And they're here to speak to it.
Okay,
Any
thank you.
questions?
Thank you for joining us.
So we were hoping maybe you could go through it again. It's kind of a
Absolutely. I'm Helen Wong from the Suffolk County Crime Lab. I misspoke last time because I had the wrong file in front of me, so I apologize for that. So hopefully this time I'll be able to clarify what went on. This case was a rape case with a male defendant and a female complainant. So there were multiple profiles that were generated. There was the defendant's DNA profile and the victim's DNA profile. Additional profiles that were generated, some matched both of them, and there were additional unknowns that didn't match any of them. So there was 2 unknown males that were full DNA profiles, unknown male A and unknown male B. There were 2 semen stains on the defendant's bedding. Those 2 stains had major components matching the defendant. Minor components did not have a gender attachment and did not match any of the known profiles. So the 2 minor components were labeled unknown individual C and unknown individual D. So unknown individual C did not match any of the other profiles in the case. The analyst felt that since this was a rape case with a male defendant and this was a seminal stain, she didn't want to attach a gender to that unknown individual D. So she didn't make the correct assumption saying it matched unknown individual, unknown male B.
So it was consistent with unknown male B.
Correct.
So it essentially was excluded or
Correct,
did not-
because it was named another individual, she excluded
Oh.
that individual.
And then
We interviewed the tech reviewer because we would have thought it would have gotten caught during tech review. And the tech reviewer remembered this conversation indicating she spoke to the analyst indicating that these are supposed to match at, they were consistent with each other. Why did you say it was a non-match? And they went with a discussion talking about gender bias, not wanting to bias the end user that the semen stain had the unknown individual being male.
Okay, so I kind of thought I understood it, and then I read the reports. I guess I got confused with section 4B in the reports.
Okay.
Compare the original report versus the corrected report. I'm assuming 4B is still talking about that. It's talking about the same evidence.
Correct.
But it looks like there's like a completely different conclusion in the revised report.
So in the revised report, after discussion with both analysts, understanding the root cause, why they didn't want to indicate bias, we went through with indicating that for all future cases, no gender will be attached to any unknowns. All unknowns would be called unknown individuals in order not to create that bias. Also, upon talking to the analyst, indicating that if the other 2 full profiles were unknown individuals, would she have said if they matched? She did say yes. She just didn't want to put a gender on it. So I felt like that the report should have gone out saying that it still matched unknown individual B, because that would be the correct conclusion. And we added in additional remarks that even though they match, there's still not a gender attached to that profile.
So in the original report, matches the minor profile of mixture 4.2.1F. F1, maybe?
The major component
Yeah.
wasn't the one in question. The major component matched the defendant.
But the minor component
Correct.
was matches unknown individual B and not A or C.
She indicated there's no other unknown individual D in any of the other profiles. This was the first time it's indicated that this profile is unknown individual D.
Okay, the corrected report matches the same profile to individual D and not A, B, or C.
The corrected report indicated that it matches unknown individual B at 421 loci. And since
No, you're
It's
right.
on
It says
page
D.
758, yeah.
It does say D now instead of B.
Yeah, it says individual D.
That is the original report.
That's the original one.
Oh,
The
okay.
other one
Hang
is
on,
on
the one above
seven,
it.
whatever, 757. Yeah,
Okay.
it's consistent with having matches unknown male B at 4 of 21 low sign does not match the DNA
So
profiles.
do I have them switched? The
Yeah.
top one is the revised?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. It's, yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. No wonder why.
I know it's very confusing. I was very confused as well, so I misspoke.
So-
I apologize.
I wasn't here for the other, so when the tech reviewer, when they discussed, the tech reviewer went with the analyst.
Correct.
Basically.
Correct. So
Do you have
we-
a process where it can go till you're like your tech lead for discussion?
because of this, we usually have a TRAR sheet discussing documenting all discussions. But usually at that point in time, we were documenting discussions that didn't agree with each other, that went to the technical leader, because both of them agreed on it. They didn't think they had to bring this discussion to a technical leader or supervisor, because they both agreed on the results.
Did they say they had any kind of discussion, like maybe one of them kind of thought this was not right, but then decided to side with the analyst? And
Yep. That is why when I questioned her separately, I knew it was a gender bias issue and not a mismatch issue, because she was able to remember this conversation very well, and it was a couple of months down the line.
And Diane Scudder, supervisor. Yeah, and it was the analyst that made the discovery. During a pretrial, she read it herself and said,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good.
And that's why there was no retraining, there was
Yeah,
no
right.
revisions.
Well, it's good practice to have them then get a third party involved and then write everything down. That's good.
So did this have any impact anywhere outside of the lab?
No.
As far as-
Not even for this case, because they never submitted more exemplars to compare this person with.
Okay.
So, thank you. Any further questions?
Yeah, it's like that.
So thank you for those.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think we've moved through the agenda. I would like us to go into executive session briefly at the end of the agenda. Is there anything for the public discussion that we need to take up?
No.
All right, so I think this concludes the public session. Sorry.
You go into executive session, you come back out into public session.
Okay, sorry. Okay. All right, thank you.
I need to inform, I think.
If there are particular reasons why you might go into
I
executive
think we
session.
have to make a motion.
Okay.
Yeah, them need a motion, safety reasons, or, I mean, I don't know what the reason is.
Okay.
What your reason is.
Well, I wanted a discussion on the familial searching that I don't think I would have preferred it to be private, but if it has to be public. So any discussions on the motion? I have a vote on the motion. Against, so the motion carries. Thank you. So excuse me, naivety on the procedures.
So we just have to ask, it appears everyone's left the room, and we need to stop recording.
Can you stop recording?
Good.
Good, okay. Okay.
So we are back in public session. Following a discussion in the executive session was the possibility was raised of inviting an appropriate person to address the committee on the rapidly evolving area of our genealogical searches. So, Dr. Beaver, did you have comments or maybe a motion to those?
I'd like to offer a motion to invite Dr. Walsh from the New York State Department of Health and Mr. Ted Hunt from the U.S. Department of Justice to address our committee at the May meeting on the topic of genetic genealogy.
Have a second. Thank you. Discussion on that. I think this is an important area that the committee could very well gather information. Decide if we have a role to play to help guide this thing. So for those in favour of this motion? Opposed? So the motion carries. Thank you. Do we have any other business? So we conclude the meeting. next meeting date is on May 7th? May 1st, excuse me, May Day.